Why do you trust what you see? Is it because your eyes are open? Because the floor feels solid beneath your feet? Because someone once told you with certainty that this is real life? But what if none of that matters? What if reality isn't something you experience, but something your mind invents just in time for you to notice it? This video isn't here to offer comfort. It's not here to tell you that the universe makes sense or that your senses are reliable tools. It's here to gently, slowly, and thoroughly dismantle your trust in what you've been calling reality. Across the next 2 hours, we will walk a quiet, spiraling path through 25 paradoxes that challenge the very core of existence. Some are born from science, quantum physics, cognitive psychology, brain simulations. Others bloom from philosophy, ancient and modern alike. And a few are the kind of truths that only emerge when you lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if you've been dreaming since birth. But before we begin unraveling these paradoxes, let's pause and sit with a simple question. What does it mean for something to be real? Is reality defined by stability, something that doesn't change no matter who's observing it? If so, then how do we explain color, which shifts depending on the viewer's eyes? Or time, which warps in the presence of speed or gravity? Or memories which reconstruct themselves each time you recall them? Perhaps reality is what's measurable. But then, again, quantum mechanics tells us that particles don't have a defined state until they're measured, and even the act of measuring seems to affect what is. Like peeking into a mirror that reshapes your face the moment you glance. Or maybe you say reality is consensus, what we all agree upon. But history laughs. Because humans once agreed the earth was flat, the heavens revolved around us, and disease was caused by bad smells and moral failings, our consensus has always been a story we update, and sometimes delete entirely. So what's left? If our senses deceive, if science defies common sense, and if agreement is temporary fiction, then what foundation are we standing on? And more importantly, what if we aren't standing at all? In this journey, you'll encounter thoughts that twist in on themselves, like Möbius strips, thoughts that claim you don't exist, that objects are hallucinations that cause and affect our illusions, and that the universe itself might just be a mind pretending to be a machine. We'll explore simulation theories that suggest you're a character in a program written by no one, brain in a vat arguments that question whether you've ever touched anything at all, and recursive feedback loops where reality creates minds that imagine reality, that create minds that imagine reality. Forever, you'll meet paradoxes that whisper, you are not the observer, you are the observation. You are not the thinker, you are the thought. You are not real. You are what realness feels like from inside a dream. These aren't just mental riddles for fun. They're portals, quiet doors in the back of your mind that open onto landscapes you've never walked. Landscapes where up and down collapse, where cause doesn't follow effect, and where identity dissolves like mist. The more you listen, the more you'll notice your thoughts trying to resist. That's natural. The human mind is built for coherence. It hates contradictions. But paradoxes don't need to be solved. They need to be sat with. Like strange animals that visit your garden at night. Mysterious, silent, familiar in a way that unnerves you. This isn't about answers. It's about awareness. Because once you notice how fragile your trust in reality is, you begin to see everything differently. The coffee in your cup, the ticking of the clock, the weight of your body on the bed, even the fact that you're watching this video, hearing this voice might feel less like an act of passive consumption and more like a strange recursive echo. Who is watching whom? So take a breath. Let your assumptions fall away like old paint peeling from a wall, and prepare to unbuild the world you thought you lived in, because what lies ahead is not fiction. It is not fantasy. It is 25 real theories rooted in physics, neuroscience, and philosophy, each one quietly humming the same truth. Reality may not be real. Shall we begin? Close your eyes for a moment. You can still hear. You can still think. You can still be. Now open your eyes. Do you trust what they show you? The shapes, the light, the smooth illusion of continuity, the floor below, the walls around, the screen in front of you. Good. Now let's break it all. Welcome to the paradox of mind inside, the first quiet bomb in this unraveling of what we call reality. It begins with a question that seems innocent enough. How do you know what you see is real? You might say, because I see it. But vision, in all its clarity, is a conjuring act. Your eyes do not deliver reality. They deliver raw light, fragmented, filtered, inverted images projected onto the back of your retina. There's a blind spot where your optic nerve connects. Your brain fills that in with a guess. Yes, a guess. Right now, a massive portion of your visual field is a hallucination that your brain paints to feel seamless. But that's not a glitch. It's how you see. In fact, everything you see, everything you hear, smell, touch, or feel isn't the world as it is. It's the world as your brain predicts it should be. And that's the heart of the paradox. You live inside an illusion, one generated by your mind, while using that same mind to judge what's real. Let's break it down further. Modern neuroscience calls it predictive processing. Your brain is not a passive receiver of the world. It's a guessing machine, constantly modeling, projecting, and filtering based on expectation. You don't perceive the world. You hallucinate it. And when your hallucination aligns with sensory input, we call it reality. But what happens when it doesn't? Ever looked at your phone and thought it buzzed, but it didn't? Ever seen something move out of the corner of your eye and nothing was there? These are not errors. They're previews, mental predictions that came too early or were never confirmed. Your mind runs ahead of input like a stagehand setting the scene before the actors arrive. Let's take it deeper. Consider your own body. You feel it sitting, breathing, grounded in the present, but those sensations are also modeled. If your brain receives delayed or mismatched signals, like in the famous rubber hand illusion, it can be tricked into thinking a fake hand is yours. All it takes is rhythm and suggestion. Now stretch this further. If your entire experience is mediated by a predicting brain, then how can you know whether there's an external world at all? You may argue, but things stay consistent. I drop a cup, it falls. I walk forward, the room changes. Consistency isn't proof of reality. It's proof of a stable illusion. Consider dreams. Within dreams, the world often feels coherent. You move, see, speak, fear. You believe it until you don't. And even when it breaks apart, it usually takes something absurd like flying goats or merging cities to alert you that something is off. So ask yourself, if your waking world has never contradicted your mental model, how would you ever know you're not dreaming? Some theorists take this even further, arguing that consciousness itself is not a thing that exists in the brain, but a byproduct of the illusion generator. That the feeling of being someone watching a world is just another hallucination layered on top of the others. Your mind creates a little theater in which you seem to sit, observe, and decide. But there is no one in the seat. This is where the paradox folds in on itself. You, the thing questioning the illusion, are part of the illusion. Your sense of self, of separation, of being inside a head watching the world outside, may all be fabricated for efficiency. Think of it like a video game. The system renders only what's needed for the player's viewpoint. You don't need a full simulation, only what fits inside the frame. Similarly, your brain renders just enough of reality to make interaction possible. It gives you a simplified, useful interface. But behind that interface, what's real? Is there anything at all? This paradox haunted philosophers long before neuroscience caught up. From Plato's cave, where shadows on the wall are mistaken for truth, to Descartes' demon, to Buddhist teachings that label the self an illusion and the world a dream. The idea is ancient. What we call reality may be a mask. And the mind, instead of removing it, may be the one holding it up. So let's return to sitting there, listening, watching, feeling certain that you are real, that this moment is real. Now, suppose this. You are not watching this video in the real world. You are inside a cognitive simulation. Your eyes are not taking in truth, but a rendering. Even the words you're hearing, these very ones are not coming from a source out there. They are being assembled in your brain, filtered through your expectations, shaped by your language maps. Meaning doesn't flow from my mind to yours. Meaning emerges inside yours alone. So what's real? Is it the pixelated screen in front of you? The voice? The chair you're sitting in? Or is it just a self-updating hallucination built by a mind inside an illusion, believing in itself while chasing a world that may not be there? You can't escape it. Because the mind trying to escape is part of it. Like a hand trying to grab itself. That's the paradox. That's where it begins. And this is just the first one. What makes something true? You might say, because it matches reality, or because it can be proven, or even because everyone agrees on it. But now let's shake those answers like dust from an old rug, because in this paradox, we dig beneath truth itself and find there's no ground, no foundation, no final certainty. Welcome to truth without ground, the second paradox, and one that has haunted philosophers, logicians, and even scientists for centuries. Let's start with a simple statement. This sentence is false. Now pause. If it's false, then it must be true. But if it's true, then it must be false. This is the liar's paradox, and it's not just a word game. It's a window into something far deeper. The idea that some truths can't settle. That meaning, when pushed far enough, collapses into itself. You might think, okay, but that's just a clever sentence. So let's widen the frame. What about logic itself? Kurt Gödel, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, proved something staggering in his incompleteness theorems. In any system of logic powerful enough to describe arithmetic, there will always be true statements that can't be proven within that system. In other words, truth exists beyond proof. Let that settle in. Our most rigorous systems, math, logic, reason, can't prove everything that's true. There will always be truths that hover just outside the system, like unreachable stars. And if that's true for logic, what about everything else? Science, too, rests on assumptions. We trust the scientific method because it works. It gives US technology, medicine, rockets, AI, but the method itself begins with axioms, that the universe is consistent, that observation can reveal patterns, that cause precedes effect, that human reasoning is, at least in part, reliable. But can we prove those assumptions without using them? Not really. They are the scaffolding upon which everything else is built, and scaffolding by nature must sit on something. But what if when we look down, there is no ground? This is the paradox. Truth may not be anchored. It may be floating, like a great web suspended by its own threads, each strand holding the others up, but none touching the earth. Let's go even deeper. Language, our main tool for describing truth, is a system of symbols. But those symbols only mean something because we agree they do. The word tree isn't made of bark or leaves. It's just a sound, a visual squiggle. It points, but it's not the thing itself. And when you try to define a word, what do you use? More words. So language becomes a closed loop. A dictionary explaining itself using itself. Try defining truth without assuming some version of truth inside your definition. You'll find yourself spinning in circles. This is what postmodern thinkers call the death of the meta-narrative. The idea that there is no final, objective story beneath all stories. No ultimate lens that tells us what is really true. And this idea creeps even into physics. At the quantum level. Particles don't have definite states until measured. That's weird enough. But now consider that different interpretations of quantum mechanics offer radically different truths. Some say particles split into infinite universes. Others say they are guided by invisible pilot waves. Others say the past is shaped by future measurements. Which one is true? All of them have predictive power. All of them describe reality, but none of them can be finally confirmed. We choose the one that fits our philosophical preference. Truth becomes taste. Now, look inward. How do you know your memories are true? They feel solid. You remember your first heartbreak, your school days, the color of your childhood bedroom. But every act of remembering is a reconstruction. Memories are not perfect recordings, they're stories the brain rebuilds each time, reshaped by mood, language, and suggestion. Even identity becomes a shifting truth. Who you are is a narrative you tell yourself based on memories that change, values that evolve, and perceptions that lie. So where then is the ground? Is it in logic? Unprovable? In science? Assumption-based. In language? Self-referential. In experience? Unstable. In memory? Rewritten? In consensus? Temporary. You may feel a kind of vertigo here, a mental freefall. That's the paradox working. It's not meant to give you an answer. It's meant to remove the floor. Because once you see that, there's no final foundation for truth. You also begin to see something liberating. If truth has no ground, then perhaps it doesn't need one. Perhaps truth is not a boulder, but a cloud, shaped by the wind, illuminated by light, ever shifting. Real in its own way, but not fixed. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. Because once you stop searching for absolute ground, you begin to explore the terrain you already inhabit, the shimmering in between, the pattern, the paradox. Truth, in this view, isn't something to be nailed down. It's something to be danced with, and the dancer is you. But even you, as we'll see, may not be as real as you think. Shall we continue? What if you never woke up? Not from last night's sleep, not from a coma, but from this moment, sitting, listening, thinking, feels real. But then again, so did your dreams? Didn't they? You believed those were real too until they weren't. And so with Paradox 3, we step deeper into the fog. This is simulated dream loop, the paradox that asks, if both waking and dreaming feel real while they happen, how do you know which one this is? Let's start with what we think. Let me know. When you dream, your brain constructs entire worlds, people, conversations, landscapes, memories, even feelings of time, all from nothing. All while your body lies still in dreams. You don't question the physics. You don't ask why the ocean is in your living room. You don't wonder how you're breathing underwater or talking to your dead grandfather in a space elevator. You just go along with it until it breaks. And then you wake up, often relieved, thinking, that was just a dream. But here's the trouble. That same feeling of realness exists in your waking state too. It's just harder to break, unless, of course, you already did. Let's entertain a possibility. This reality right now, with its consistent laws, stable identities, recurring schedules, and persistent objects, is just another dream. A higher order one. A dream with rules. You see, your brain doesn't need external input to create vivid experiences. Dreams prove that. So what if waking life is simply a more stable, long-form dream? And what if the only reason you trust it is because you haven't woken up yet? Now add a modern twist. Simulation theory. Philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed that if any civilization in the universe ever becomes technologically advanced enough to simulate conscious beings, then it's likely we're already inside such a simulation. Because once it's possible to simulate life, you can simulate it millions, billions of times. And that means statistically, you're more likely to be inside a simulation than outside it. But everything feels too real, you might say, too detailed, too solid. Of course it does. The simulation or dream would be designed that way. After all, if it didn't feel real, it would fail. Still not convinced. Let's try a thought loop. What's the difference between a hyper-realistic dream and a simulation you can't detect? Nothing. Both involve full immersion. Both involve consciousness existing inside a self-contained world. Both can create laws, systems, feedback loops. Both can feel infinite, even if they last seconds dot, and if your dream self inside the dream says, this is definitely real, that's part of the dream 2 dot, so now you're stuck in a loop. You experience reality. You trust it because it's stable, but dreams also feel stable. Until they don't. Simulations, if well made, would feel exactly like this dot, so how do you know this isn't one of them? You don't, and that's the paradox. Worse still, even if you became aware that this is a dream or a simulation, you'd still be inside it. There's no clear exit. Because every attempt to verify the reality of your world depends on the rules of that world. You're asking a video game character to prove the console exists, using code from the game itself. And here's where it gets even more recursive. What if every time you wake up from a dream, from sleep, from death, you simply enter another simulation? What if life is an infinite stack of nested dreams? Dream within dream, reality within reality. Loop after loop, and no layer is fundamentally realer than the others? That would mean there's no base layer, no final reality. Just illusion after illusion. Each one pretending to be the last dot, like Russian dolls with no smallest doll inside. This idea is reflected in ancient philosophy too. Hinduism speaks of Maya, the illusion of the material world. And Buddhism suggests that life and death are dreamlike states, navigated by consciousness. Plato's cave reminds us that what we think is out there may just be shadows on a wall dot, so maybe this isn't new. Maybe we've always suspected it. Maybe our gut already knows something isn't right here, and yet, here's the final twist. Even if everything is simulated, even if your life is a dream loop stitched together by someone or something else, your experience still feels real. Pain still hurts. Love still burns. Memories still shape you dot, so maybe the paradox doesn't mean life is meaningless. Maybe it means that meaning itself doesn't need a real world to exist. Maybe meaning lives in the loop, not outside it. You don't have to escape the dream to wake up. You just have to see a dot, and once you do, the world doesn't disappear. It just shimmers like something remembered from long ago. Like a whisper that says, this is not what you think it is. But it's beautiful anyway. Now take a breath, because if this is a dream, you're the dreamer, and we still have 22 paradoxes to go. Here's a rock dot. It's cold, heavy, solid. You could throw it through a window. It would smash glass. It would land with a thud. It exists undeniably, physically, right? Now imagine this. What if that rock, with all its mass, texture, and resistance, is only there because you think it is? Welcome to Thought Creates Stone. The paradox that shatters the boundary between mind and matter. Let's begin with a premise that sounds harmless enough. Everything you perceive is filtered through consciousness. You don't experience the rock. Directly, you experience your mind's model of the rock. Your senses feed in data, but your brain assembles it into something meaningful. Shape, texture, color, weight, all interpreted, all reconstructed. Now here's the paradox. If you can never access the rock outside of your perception of it, how do you know it exists at all? We assume the physical world is separate from us, that it sits out there, indifferent and objective. But quantum mechanics keeps whispering something else. At the smallest scales, particles don't have definite properties until they're observed. Their behavior changes depending on how and whether they're measured. The act of looking changes what's real. This isn't poetry. It's math. It's the infamous double-slit experiment, where light and matter behave as both particle and wave, collapsing into a specific form only when observed. The observer is not passive. The observer is part of the equation. Now, rewind to your rock dot in a universe where observation changes reality. Is the rock truly there when unperceived? Or does it flicker unrealized until your mind constructs it from sensory impressions? And memory? Let's go further. Your brain doesn't simply mirror the world, it builds it. Every second, it's translating electrochemical impulses into a model. You touch the rock and you feel hardness, but that sensation doesn't happen in your fingers. It happens in your mind. The nerve signals travel inward, are interpreted, and then presented back to you as stone, which means you've never felt the rock. You've only felt your mind's version of what stone should be. This brings us to idealism, a philosophy that reverses the usual assumption. Rather than saying the mind perceives reality, it proposes that reality arises from mind. That matter is not primary. Consciousness is. Under this view, the rock doesn't exist independently. It's a construct, a stable pattern of perceptions held together by agreement and expectation. It feels real not because it is, but because your thoughts build it as real, and everyone else's thoughts agree. And here's where it gets strange. If thought shapes perception, and perception defines reality, then thought creates stone. Not metaphorically, but functionally it's not that the rock is fake. It's that the rock is a thought, dressed in the garments of mass and resistance. A story your mind tells so consistently, so convincingly, that you forget it began as a whisper in the dark. Let's bring in dreams again, in a dream. You can pick up a stone, feel its weight, skip it across a lake. You can believe in its existence, even feel its chill, but there is no rock. No lake, it's all imagined, but experienced as real. Waking life may be more consistent, but that doesn't make it fundamentally different. It may simply be a more convincing interface. A dream with better physics, but you say, if I throw this rock at a wall, the wall breaks. That's cause and effect. That's physical. Sure, but inside a dream, when you fall off a cliff, your heart still pounds. Your dream body still panics. Your mind simulates cause and effect so well that it fools you. Why should waking life be immune to that? There's a term for this idea, participatory realism. It suggests that the universe doesn't exist as a fixed object waiting to be discovered. Instead, it exists as it's discovered, and the discoverer shapes it. So maybe the stone doesn't precede thought. Maybe it requires thought. Maybe stone is what thought looks like when it wants to appear UNEMOVA. Thought now, sit with this. Everything you've ever touched. You never really touched. Everything you've ever seen. You never directly saw. You have lived entirely inside your own consciousness, trusting that the models it builds are reflections, not inventions. But if they are inventions, the world is something your mind generates on demand. Then the dividing line between thought and matter begins to dissolve. Your desk, your house, your body, all stone made from thought. All illusion that holds itself together through agreement, habit, and belief. So where does it leave you? You, the thinker, sitting in a world of thoughts, pretending to be things. You dreaming up solidity, then building your life upon it. You, unsure whether you create reality or simply surf its surface like a shadow riding waves. And here's the final loop. If your thoughts shape reality, and your reality convinces you that your thoughts do not, then you are being tricked by yourself. That's the paradox. The world is real, but only because you believe it is. The stone is solid, but only because you've never doubted it long enough to watch it disappear. And maybe, just maybe, doubt itself is the first crack in the stone. Onward. You wake up in the morning and believe you're stepping forward into reality. The sun rises, coffee brews. The day unfolds moment by moment, like a path being laid in front of you. Reality feels like something you move into. It's ahead of you, waiting to happen. But what if that's backwards? What if realness doesn't move forward at all, but instead is constantly created behind you after the fact, so you can believe you've lived it? Welcome to Realness in Reverse, the paradox that challenges your entire timeline. Let's start with something deeply personal, your memories. You think of memory as a record, something like a dusty attic full of moments you've stored away. But neuroscience tells a different story. Memories aren't fixed. They're reassembled each time you recall them, like a stage play performed from scattered scripts. And worse, each time you remember something, your brain alters it, reinforcing some details, erasing others. This means that the past, the foundation of your personal reality, isn't solid. It's sculpted in reverse. Now think about perception. You believe what you see is real because it seems immediate. You open your eyes and the world appears. But your brain doesn't work that way. Sensory input arrives with delays. Light hits. Your retina travels along nerves, gets processed, interpreted, and matched against expectations. By the time you see something, you're already hundreds of milliseconds behind the moment. Your experience of now is already past. You live in a constant echo. So, what is real? And when is it real? This is where the paradox turns, rather than reality moving forward and you catching up. It might be more accurate to say that your mind creates the feeling of having just arrived. Long after the event, it's like walking through a hallway, and only as you pass each painting does it appear. But in your memory, you believe it was there all along. In this view, realness isn't something you move through. It's something generated behind you to make the path seem coherent. Let's bring in a classic example from psychology, the Libet experiment. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet asked participants to move their hands whenever they felt the urge. He found that brain activity predicting the movement occurred several hundred milliseconds before participants reported making a conscious decision. In other words, your brain had already decided, and then it told you a story afterward that you had decided. Free will was reconstructed. The choice was real. In reverse, apply that logic more broadly. What if your experience of cause and effect of decision, of motion, is just a neat illusion your brain weaves together slightly after everything has already happened? Now, step back and think about time. Physicists have long debated the arrow of time. At a quantum level, many equations are time-symmetric. They don't care which direction time flows. This suggests that the flow of time, the feeling that past leads to present, leads to future, may not be built into the universe. It may be built into you. And if time flows from the past to the future only because your memory is ordered that way, then perhaps what's real isn't unfolding forward at all. Perhaps realness is something created after the experience to give shape to what you've already done. Like a dream that makes sense only after you wake up and stitch it together. Like a painting whose brushstrokes appear only after you've walked away. Let's make it stranger. Some theories in quantum mechanics, like the delayed choice quantum eraser, suggest that a particle's state in the past can be altered by a measurement taken in the present, that the present can change the past. This isn't metaphor. It's experimental physics, which means reality might be retroactive. Events don't become real until they're locked in, sometimes long after they happened. So maybe the world doesn't present itself to you in a continuous stream. Maybe it waits, builds possibilities, and then collapses into a real story once you've moved past the moment. And your brain, always the loyal narrator, edits the tape, adds just enough context to make it feel inevitable. You remember walking through that hallway? You remember seeing the painting? You remember making the choice, but the hallway was drawn after you passed? The choice made before you chose. The painting painted after you looked away. Now ask yourself, if reality is built in reverse, if experience is retrofitted, if time's arrow is a convenience rather than a law, then what is now? What you call the present may be a clever illusion, a seam. Your mind stitches between what was and what it just imagined. You think you're living forward, but perhaps you're walking backwards, eyes wide open, through a world being assembled behind you as you pass, while you tell yourself, this is real. This is happening. This is me. That's the paradox. Reality might be real, but it might only become real after you think it already was. And that means the story of your life isn't unfolding. It's being rewritten in hindsight. So take another breath and don't look back too quickly. The realness might still be loading. There's something wrong with the world. You felt it. Not always, not dramatically. But now and then in those quiet spaces between distractions, when the noise dims and your mind is still, something feels off. Too convenient. Too orderly. Too scripted. Welcome to fake world proof. The paradox that asks, What if the most convincing evidence for reality is actually proof that it's fake? Let's begin with a simple observation. The world works. The laws of physics are consistent. Time flows smoothly. Gravity keeps your feet on the ground. Objects stay where you put them. You wake up in the same body each day. On the surface, this seems like strong evidence that the world is real. But here's where the paradox turns inside out. What if it's too perfect? What if the predictability of the world isn't a sign of authenticity, but the hallmark of design? Think about video games, simulations. Every detail is controlled, consistent, optimized to keep you immersed. You don't want glitches, you want it to feel real. So the more seamless it is, the less likely you are to question it. Apply that to your life. What if the very stability of your reality is the clearest sign that it's a fabrication? Let's bring in simulation theory. Again, Nick Bostrom's famous argument goes like this. If a civilization can create perfectly realistic simulated beings with consciousness, and if they run many such simulations, then statistically, you're far more likely to be inside one of those simulations than in the one true base reality. Think about it. If there's one real world, but trillions of simulated ones, the odds are in your favor. You might say, but I experience emotion, suffering, joy, self-awareness that can't be simulated. But emotions, thoughts, even consciousness, as far as science can tell, are functions of neural patterns. And patterns can be simulated. In fact, they already are. We've built neural nets that recognize faces, generate language, write music. Imagine what's possible in a few hundred more years. So the question isn't whether a simulation could exist. It's whether you're already in one. And here's the core twist of the paradox. If your world had flaws, you'd question it. If it had obvious bugs, you'd notice. But if it's flawless, if it's just believable enough, you never stop to ask. That's not evidence of reality. That's evidence of a successful illusion. Let's make this creepier. Have you ever felt like the world reacts to you? You're thinking of someone and they call. You notice a strange word, and then you hear it 3 more times that day. You see a number pattern, 1111, 333, over and over. These moments feel meaningful, almost as if something behind the scenes is signaling you. Rationally, we chalk it up to coincidence or pattern recognition, but emotionally, it feels tailored. Now, imagine a simulation that's not just passively rendering the world, but dynamically adjusting to keep you immersed, to keep you awake just enough, but not so much that you break out. The world around you feels responsive, not because it's alive, but because it's designed to be convincing. Even boredom could be a feature, not a bug. Why is it that the human world is just complex enough to keep us busy, but not so complex that we fall apart? Why is it that no matter how deep we dig into physics, there's always one more mystery, just out of reach? Like a magician keeping your attention while the trick unfolds behind the curtain. Now, think about death. You don't remember being born. You won't be around to comment on death. What if your simulated world simply ends when your consciousness is no longer needed? Like a character in a video game who disappears once the player stops playing. You never know. That's the trap. If the world is fake, it would be designed in such a way that you couldn't tell. And every piece of evidence you gather for reality, laws, consistency, sensations, might simply be the design functioning perfectly. Let's twist again. Suppose someone told you there is no spoon. You'd laugh because you can see the spoon. You can feel it. But that's precisely how belief works. The moment you believe in the illusion becomes self-sustaining. Which means the strongest sign that your world is an illusion is that it never gives you a reason to doubt it. That's the paradox. The more real it feels, the more likely it's fake. The more convinced you are that you're awake, the more deeply you may be dreaming. The more seamless the story, the more it was written for you. And a punchline, even this thought that you're in a fake world may be part of the design. A test, a glitch. or just a feature to keep you wondering without ever waking up. Dot. So go ahead, knock on the desk, feel the texture, smell the air. Dot. It all works, doesn't it? That's the problem. Who are you? No, not your name. Not your job, your story, your favorite color, or the music you play when no one's listening. Not the mask. You strip it all away, the memories, the habits, the voice inside your head. What's left? You think there must be something, a core, a center, a tiny glowing me that lives deep inside, pulling the strings. But what if there's nothing there? Welcome to Self Without Core, the paradox that asks, what if the person you think you are doesn't actually exist? Let's start with a metaphor. Imagine an onion. You peel it. One layer, then another. Personality, memories, roles, desires, fears, opinions. You keep peeling. You expect to reach the center, but you don't. You reach nothing. The onion is made of layers. That is the onion. And you? You're just the same. Modern neuroscience increasingly supports this view. There's no single place in the brain where you live. There's no control center, no captain on the ship, just processes. Distributed circuits, loops of prediction, emotion, memory, and perception, woven together tightly enough to create the illusion of a stable self. But it is an illusion. Even your preferences, what you like, what you hate, what you believe are shaped by forces you didn't choose, genetics, environment, culture, childhood traumas, random events. You didn't choose your language. You didn't choose your instincts. You didn't choose to prefer sweetness over bitterness or to cry during certain music. So what did you choose? And if your thoughts arise uninvited, your feelings emerge spontaneously. And your actions are triggered by causes you can't trace. Who's in charge? You might say, but I feel like I'm someone. I'm having these thoughts. I'm here. Yes, but who is saying that? The mind creates the sense of a narrator, a voice that speaks over your experiences, giving them meaning. But the voice isn't you. It's a function, a pattern, like subtitles on a movie. This illusion is so convincing because it's constant. From the moment you wake, the mind narrates, I'm tired. I should get coffee. That person is looking at me weird. I'm not good enough. I'm getting better. I'm hungry. I'm me. But what if that I is just the echo of a process, not the source of it? Let's bring in Eastern philosophy. For thousands of years, Buddhism has taught the concept of anatta, no self. It says the self is not a thing, but a process, a collection of 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Together, they give rise to the feeling of self. But none of them are the self, and none of them stay. This is where the paradox truly blooms. You feel like a single, continuous identity. But you are a different person when you're angry, or in love, or drunk, or dreaming. Which one is the real you? Your memories shift, your beliefs evolve, your body changes. You are at every moment a different configuration of experience. And yet you say, this is me. Who? There's no unchanging you to be found. Only change, only flux, only layers, without a center. Even your sense of continuity, the thread that ties your past to your present, is manufactured. Your brain knits moments together, smoothing over gaps, like a film reel that turns still frames into motion. But pull out the reel, and it's just flickers. No core, no soul. No, you in the middle of it all. Still, something inside resists. It says, but I'm here, I'm reading this, I'm experiencing it. Let's examine that. Yes, there's awareness. But awareness doesn't require a self. A camera records light without a subject. A mirror reflects a face without being one. You don't need to be someone to witness something. You just need witnessing. So maybe you aren't a thing at all. Maybe you're a verb. Not self, but selfing. Not a fixed identity, but an ongoing activity. Not the wave, but the motion of water in time. And if that's true, then you've never been trapped. There's nothing to protect, nothing to prove, nothing to find. You are not a fixed entity. You are the flickering dance of experience. Moment to moment, breath to breath. That's the paradox. The self feels like the most real thing you have. The voice that says, I am. But look close enough, and the voice has no mouth, no speaker. Just echo. Just thought thinking itself into being. Just memory pretending to be a person. Just sensation claiming to be mine. A self without a center. A story without a storyteller. And you are free because the cage was empty all along. You wake up, you stand on the floor, you feel its firmness. You walk to the sink and water flows, you see your hands, you touch your face. Everything feels solid, grounded, as if the world was always here and you just arrived to witness it. But what if that solidity is a performance? What if everything that feels stable, physical, and real is imagined? This is the paradox of solid yet imagined, where we explore how the things that feel most unchangeably there are constructed inside your mind, rebuilt constantly, and never directly experienced at all. Dots start with a chair. You see it across the room. 4 legs, 1 seat, 1 back. It's brown. You assume it's hard. You've sat on chairs your whole life, so this one doesn't surprise you. But now, let's strip it down. You don't actually see the chair. You see photons, particles of light that reflect off the object, enter your eyes, and hit your retina. They're translated into neural signals, interpreted by your visual cortex. Your brain compares this signal with memories and object. Models then outputs a coherent image, chair. You never touch the chair directly. You touch the electrical signals your brain feeds you. This happens so quickly and so consistently that you forget it's a construction. But everything you call real is filtered through this system. You're not seeing the world. You're seeing your mind's version of the world dot still. You say, it's solid. I can't walk through it. It resists me. Of course, but that resistance is part of the illusion dot at the atomic level. Matter is almost entirely empty. Space. The hardness of the chair is not a result of particles touching, because particles never touch. What you feel is the electromagnetic force between the electrons in your hand and those in the chair, repelling each other. Solidity is a trick. Your hand doesn't stop because of a wall. It stops because the field surrounding particles create the illusion of contact. What feels hard is a negotiation of invisible forces. What feels there is a guess, a model. Now think of virtual reality. Strap on a headset, and your brain can be convinced you're standing on a cliff. Even though you're in your living room, your stomach drops, your palms sweat. The cliff isn't real, but your reaction is the brain doesn't require real input. It only requires consistent input, and it will generate the feeling of solidity from nothing but suggestion and pattern dot in dreams. You can hold objects, touch faces, fall, drown, fly, cry. Nothing in that world is made of atoms, but everything feels present. You never stop to question the table's chemical composition or whether the ceiling can be trusted not to collapse. You just believe. Because the experience feels solid. Your waking life, maybe no different, just a more convincing stage. Let's take it even further. Some theories in philosophy, like phenomenalism, argue that objects don't exist independently of our perception of them. The chair isn't there when no one observes it. It's potential, not actual dot until attention lands on it. It's an unwritten part of the script. Sound crazy? Then ask yourself, what's behind you right now? You believe it's the room, the chair, the wall, but you're not perceiving it. Your brain is simply holding the memory of it, like a loaded image in a paused game. You don't perceive the world. You anticipate it. You don't feel solidity. You simulate a dot, so where does that leave you? Standing in a house of thoughts that feels like concrete. Living in a movie so seamless you forgot you were inside it. Trusting your senses, even though they've admitted again and again that they're guessing. You may still argue, but everything behaves consistently. Objects don't vanish when I close my eyes. Yes, because the model you live inside is consistent. That doesn't make it objective, that it just makes it immersive. The paradox here is not that nothing is real, but that the realness you feel may not belong to the thing itself, but to your mind's rendering of it. Solidity isn't the property of the object. It's the product of the VRCICIV or dot. So maybe there's no thing out there that's solid. Maybe there's just pattern, probability, expectation woven together tightly enough that you stop asking questions. You sit in a chair. It holds you. But that moment, the feeling of being supported happens only in your mind. The wood, the screws, the weight. All guessed. All imagined dot, and the world agrees with you just enough to keep you believing. That's the paradox. You're surrounded by solidity, but none of it is solid. You're grounded in matter, but matter is mostly nothing. You feel presence. But it's a story the brain writes, one frame at a time dot. So next time you pick up a cup or press your feet into the ground, ask yourself, is this real? Or just real enough to keep me from falling, solid, yet imagined, and somehow still holding you. You look at a bird, it flutters across the sky, wings catching the light, its motion smooth and seamless. You say, I saw it. Simple, obvious. You trust your eyes. They're your direct line to the world. Right? But what if you didn't actually see it until after you believed you had? What if everything you perceive arrives late and your brain fills in the blanks before you even notice? This is unseen seen first. The paradox that reveals how your experience of sight may not be perception at all, but a carefully reconstructed illusion your brain inserts just in time. Let's begin with timing. When light enters your eyes, it has to pass through a series of complex steps. The retina converts photons into electrical signals, which travel down the optic nerve, through the thalamus and into the visual cortex. There, a cascade of neural processing happens. Shapes, colors, depth, movement, all interpreted before you get the final image. This takes time, roughly 100 to 300 milliseconds. That's a third of a second delay. By the time you see something, it's already gone. But your brain doesn't show you a blurry lagging feed like a buffering video. Instead, it predicts. It fills in what it expects to be there. And what you experience as sight is more like a memory than a live transmission. This is why the paradox begins. You believe you see things when they happen. But in truth, you're always catching up dot, and sometimes the brain cheats. Let's talk about the flash lag illusion dot. In this experiment, a moving object is paired with a flashing light. When both appear at the same position, your brain perceives the moving object as being ahead of the flash, even though they're aligned. Why? Because your brain is trying to predict where the moving object will be. And it fills in the motion. Before it actually happens, you don't see the object and track it. Your brain guesses where it should be and shows you that version instead. You're not observing. You're forecasting dot now step into another illusion, the color-free phenomenon. Two lights blink in rapid succession, one after the other in different locations and colors. Your brain doesn't just see a jump from A to B instead. It sees a light moving smoothly between the points, changing color in motion. But here's the catch. It invents the in-between motion after both lights have blinked that the movement you see never happened. The brain shows it to you retroactively, smoothing time itself, which means you're not seeing what's there. You're seeing what your brain decides should have been there. This flips the concept of sight on its head. Instead of being a window to the present, your vision is a reconstruction of the recent past, polished just enough to trick you into feeling like it's now. And it's not just vision. Studies in auditory perception show similar delays. When sounds and visuals don't quite line up, like in dumb movies, your brain sometimes stretches or compresses your hearing to match your expectations, not your environment. Your expectations dot so the brain doesn't just fill in missing information. It rewrites your timeline dot. Now ask yourself this. If all your sensory input is being edited, interpreted, how do you know any of it happened when you think it did? You don't You only ever experience the illusion of immediacy. This is the essence of the paradox. You see things only after your mind believes they happened. The event is unseen in real time, but the brain pretends it saw it. At first, it gets weirder. Some experiments suggest that decisions can be predicted in the brain before the person reports making them, but the moment you decide to move, your finger or say a word might occur after the unconscious brain has already made the choice. You act. Then you're told a story that you chose. Sight may work the same way. You observe. Then you're told a story that you saw. So what? Then is perception. It's not a live feed. It's a hallucination with feedback. It's memory disguised as presence. It's a painting your brain finishes after the canvas has already faded into the dark. And here's the disturbing part. You'll never know this because the illusion is perfect by design. The delay is hidden. The prediction is silent. And the result is a smooth, seamless flow of moments that feel real because they don't glitch. But the bird you saw it only after it flew away. The road you're driving on, already in your mind before your eyes caught up. Even this sentence, this very moment, may be arriving late. That's the paradox. You trust your senses, but your senses trust memory, and your memory trusts a story stitched together by something behind your eyes, working faster than you can comprehend. You never see the world. You see a version of the world that your brain decided after the fact was the best guess. The unseen, seen first. Or at least seen as if it had been. You take a breath, feel the air, look around. Everything is stitched together perfectly. Space stretches outward, time ticks forward, cause leads to effect. This is the fabric of your reality. You trust it because it's consistent. But what if that very consistency is a trick? What if space and time, the very fabric reality is woven from, are not just flexible, but deceptive? Welcome to Fabric That Lies, the paradox that reveals how space and time, the twin pillars of your experience, might not be as fundamental or as honest as they seem. Let's begin with time. You experience it like a flowing river, past behind, future ahead, now in the middle. But physics disagrees. In Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not a flow, it's a dimension. And motion through time is affected by gravity, velocity, and mass. Clocks tick slower in stronger gravity. Time bends. It warps. That's not a metaphor. That's math. That's experiment. Put an atomic clock at sea level and another on a mountaintop. They'll tick at different rates. Now, consider what this means. If time flows differently depending on where you are and how fast you're moving, then the idea of a now, a single present moment shared by all, doesn't exist. Your now is not my now. Each observer lives in their own stitched timeline, but your brain doesn't tell you that. Your brain pretends the world is synchronized. That's the first lie. Now look at space. You imagine it as a neutral stage, a 3D grid, a box in which things exist. But quantum physics complicates that 2 at the Planck scale, the smallest possible unit of length. Space is not smooth. It seethes with fluctuations. Virtual particles pop in and out of existence. The vacuum of space is not empty. It's alive with chaos. It has energy. It has structure. It has lies. Even position becomes blurry. A particle isn't somewhere. It's possibly somewhere smeared across probability until you measure it. And your active measurement doesn't reveal where it was. It creates where it is. Space, in other words, doesn't passively contain the world. It participates in shaping it. And this too, your brain hides. Because when you stretch out your hand, the world feels stable. Distance feels absolute. You think you can measure it, map it, master it, but beneath the surface, nothing is stable. Space is a shifting stage. Time is a local suggestion. The universe isn't stitched together from certainty. It's woven from possibility. Now, let's look at the most uncomfortable twist. In 2022. Theoretical physicists Sabine Hossenfelder and others suggested that space and time may not be fundamental at all. That they might emerge from deeper, non-spatial. Non-temporal structures, perhaps quantum entanglement patterns, or networks of pure information. That means space and time might not exist on their own. They could be illusions, useful ones, that emerge only at our scale of reality. Like temperature, real but not fundamental. You don't find hotness in one molecule. You find it in large systems. Maybe space is like that. Maybe time is like that dot, and that's the heart of this paradox. You believe you live in space and move through time. But what if those dimensions are created inside your mind, assembled from sensory input and internal models, projected outward like a holographic shell? What if time isn't something you're passing through, but something your brain constructs second by second to make sense of change? What if space isn't something that exists between objects, but something invented to explain the distance between experiences? In that case, the fabric of reality isn't objective. It's narrative, and the story it tells is stitched by you. Here's a metaphor. Imagine a movie. It's made of frames, still images, one after another. But when played quickly, it feels fluid, alive, continuous. Your life may be no different. Each moment is a frame. And your brain, the editor, cuts, pastes, scores, and smooths. It removes the gaps. It blends the seams. You ever see the transitions? You only see the illusion of a world dot and the fabric. The fabric lies. It tells you the world is steady. It tells you time is linear. It tells you space is there whether you look or not. But physics says otherwise. Your experience is composed of approximations. Your senses are calibrated not to see truth, but to see survival. And truth, in this case, is a tangled net of half-truths stitched just tightly enough to keep you from slipping through dots of a chair you're sitting on. The room around you, the hours ticking by, they're convincing, they're immersive. But are they foundational, or are they the interface? Like icons on a screen, simple, flat images that represent complex, hidden code? Your reality may be a user interface. Space is the desktop, time is the progress bar, and you are the cursor. That's the paradox. You trust the fabric. But the fabric is a veil. It holds you not to protect you, but to keep you from noticing what lies beneath dot, and when you tug at it, when you really ask what space and time are, the fabric FRAYS dot, and behind it, silence, structureless, timeless, yet somehow still happening. Shall we pull the next thread? You're here. You feel present, alive, awake, thinking, breathing, watching. You don't just exist. You are a living awareness sitting quietly inside this moment. But now the paradox arrives, uninvited. What if your sense of being isn't evidence of existence, but something else entirely? What if being doesn't prove you exist? Because existence, as we define it, might not even be real? This is being without existence, the paradox that dares to separate the experience of consciousness from the structure we usually believe supports it. Let's begin with Descartes. He famously declared, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. The idea is seductive. If you're doubting, you must exist because who else is doing the doubting? But what if we flip it? What if the thought doesn't prove a thinker? What if the thought or the awareness of the thought is just happening without anyone behind? Modern neuroscience has searched for the soul. The central observer, the metaphysical captain at the helm of your experience, and it hasn't found it. Instead, it finds distributed processing, neural networks, prediction loops. It finds activity, but no anchor, no self, no singular node that can be called you. In fact, your sense of being someone may simply be a product of the brain observing its own outputs. Like the camera pointed at a screen playing the camera's own footage. Awareness watching awareness dot. So then what is being? Is it just the feeling of experience without anything beneath it? Is it possible to feel alive, awake, and alert? Even if you don't actually exist in any physical or metaphysical sense. This leads us into phenomenology, the study of conscious experience from the inside. It asks, what is it like to be? Without assuming anything about the external world, and phenomenologists have long noted a strange truth. Experience doesn't guarantee reality. You can feel pain in a dream, love, regret, time passing. You can even feel self-aware. None of it needs to be rooted in existence. You just are, even if what you are is fictional. Being doesn't require substance. Let's push this further. In some interpretations of quantum mechanics, particles exist only in a haze of probabilities until observed. The act of observation makes them real. But what if the reverse is true of you? What if your existence only emerges because you experience it? There may be no real you, no fixed self, no being with substance, but the experience of being. The feeling of I am continues anyway. That's the paradox. You are being without necessarily existing. Now, consider simulation again. Imagine a world like a dream or a digital landscape where there's no real body, no atoms, no true externality, but there is awareness. There is observation. There is thought. Does that mind exist? Or is it merely happening? If experience arises spontaneously without a self behind it, without an entity to own it, is that being? Or is that just noise echoing in an empty chamber? Here's a thought experiment. Imagine a computer program running lines of dialogue. It simulates a character that says, I feel lonely. That phrase appears on the screen. It's processed. But is there anyone actually feeling lonely? Probably not. And yet, the expression of the feeling happened. Could your own experience of joy, confusion, be the same? Just a phrase on a screen, no speaker, no writer, just appearing. There's a Buddhist teaching that captures this elegantly. There is thinking, but no thinker. There's breathing, but no breather. You assume there's a self because experience is happening. But the self may be an illusion constructed after the fact. A way to tie experiences into a narrative, being becomes a performance. Existence becomes a myth. Still, you protest. But I feel it. I feel here. I feel real. Of course. But that feeling is part of the show. You can feel real in a dream. You can feel present while hallucinating. You can feel awake while your brain is inventing everything from scratch. So maybe your being is a sensation, a side effect of awareness, not a sign of existence. As a fixed truth might never be provable, but being, it persists, like a flame with no candle, like a sound with no source, like light without a bulb. You are the echo of something that never spoke, the residue of a story without a writer, a presence without origin, substance, or explanation. And that is the paradox. You are here, you feel, you notice. But there may be no you to begin with, just being bubbling up from nowhere. No self, no structure, no existence. Just this moment. Unshaped, ownerless, unexplained, and somehow still happening. Look around you. You see things, a phone, a cup, a door, a sky full of light, or a ceiling that doesn't care. You reach out, you touch, you trust. These are objects. They take up space. They exist. But now ask something deeply unsettling. What is an object made of? Not in terms of atoms or molecules, but in terms of actuality. What is there at the core? Welcome to Object of Nothing, the paradox that reveals how everything you believe to be solid, real, and composed of stuff may, at its most fundamental level, be nothing at all. Let's begin with a chair. It seems obvious. 4 legs, a surface, weight, function. But zoom in. At the atomic level, it's mostly empty space. In fact, more than 99.99999% of every atom is nothing. The nucleus is a tiny speck in a vast field, and electrons don't. Orbit like planets. They smear out into probability clouds. There's no hard edge, no final surface, no thingness. Just energy, position possibilities, statistical fuzz. You never touch the chair. Your hand hovers near its electron field, and your electrons push back. It feels solid. But what's beneath that feeling? Not substance, just force. Just space between space dot and still. You call it an object. Now let's go deeper. Particle. Themselves, the building blocks of matter, are not things in the traditional sense. Quantum field theory tells us particles are excitations in invisible fields that permeate space. What you think of as a particle is just a ripple, a bump in a field. A fluctuation dot, not a pebble. Not a grain of matter, but an event dot in those events. They blink into existence, then blink out. Virtual particles appear from nothing, exist for a sliver of a moment, and vanish. The vacuum is not empty. It's seething with quantum possibility, and yet, it's still nothing. A foaming sea of maybe dot. So when you point at a cup and say, this is real, what are you actually pointing at? Form, function, a shape your brain recognizes. But when you strip it down to what it really is, it's a vibrating pattern in a field you can't see. Which is to say, it's a story written on a blank page. Now think about your concept of thingness. You say object as if it's stable, like it has a core identity. But the more you examine anything, the more it dissolves. You don't find a final particle, you find interactions, relationships, dependencies. A web, not a nugget dot, so. Perhaps objects don't exist as things, but as points of meaning. As useful illusions. Concepts that arise when patterns persist long enough to be named. Here's a wild twist from metaphysics. Some theories suggest that the universe doesn't contain objects at all. Only relations. That nothing exists by itself. That everything only is because of how it interacts with everything else. In this view, a chair isn't a chair. It's something that supports a sitting body under certain conditions in a gravity field with the expectation of stability. Change one condition, the gravity, the person. The purpose and the object vanishes. So maybe objects are not entities. Maybe they are contexts, and contexts are thoughts. And if you push this to its limit, here's where the paradox spirals. What if the object you perceive is just a placeholder, a shape assigned to a region of nothing? Nothing, not as in emptiness, but nothing as in no core, no self, no essence, just form. And your interpretation of it. Think of a mirage. You see a pool of water on the road. Light bends. Your brain says water, but there is none. The mirage is not a lie. It's a truth without substance. A pattern with no object. Maybe every object is a mirage, a truth of sensation, built on structural void. That's what Buddhists might call anyat, emptiness. The idea that all things lack inherent existence, that nothing stands alone. That form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And still, you sit in a room filled with things. You sip from a cup, you type on a device, you lean into the world as if it's built from objects. But behind every object, there's nothing. Not the void of despair, not the nihilism of loss, but the pure, silent absence of a center. And this paradox is the secret your coffee mug never told you. It holds shape, it holds heat, but it holds no self. It is quite literally an object of nothing. And so are you. So is your home. So is the sky. So is time. Everything is made of not a thing. And that's what makes it dance. You want substance. You want solidity. But reality gives you relationship. It gives you patterns. It gives you echoes. And when you finally touch the world, you're always touching the surface of a dream made of empty light. You just didn't know the dream was empty. 2. You look in the mirror, you see a face, your face, you blink, the reflection blinks back. You frown, it frowns. A perfect copy, familiar, trustworthy, but now step back. Look not into the mirror, but into your own mind. What do you see? This is false mirror mind. The paradox that whispers, your mind reflects the world, but it might not reflect you. We're told our mind is the final judge, the source of truth. the mirror through which we understand reality. It sees, hears, processes, evaluates. It creates identity, decision, will, memory. But what if the mind doesn't reflect reality accurately at all? What if the mirror lies? And worse, what if the mirror isn't even facing the right direction? Let's begin with perception. We think. Our mind simply takes in the world. It listens, watches, feels. But perception, as we've explored before, isn't passive. Your brain isn't a mirror, it's a sculptor. It cuts, edits, adds shadows, and paints over gaps. It doesn't show you what's there. It shows you what it expects to be there. And once expectation replaces observation, the mirror distorts. We call this predictive processing. The idea that the brain is constantly anticipating the next moment and showing you its best guess. But guesses are not truths. They're hypotheses tested against input. Most of the time they're close. But close isn't the same as real. So the mind reflects. But not faithfully. Now consider memory. You think of memories as internal photographs. But every time you remember something, you rebuild it. Memory is not stored and played back. It is reconstructed. Like drawing the same scene from scratch every time, adding new details, forgetting others, reinterpreting the whole picture through today's lens. What you recall is not what happened. It's what your mind believes should have happened. The mirror doesn't reflect the past. It paints over it. Now let's go deeper to thought itself. You believe your thoughts are yours, that they rise from within, guided by your will, echoing your desires, but thoughts emerge uninvited. Sit still, and they pour in like rain through a broken roof. You didn't summon them, you didn't shape them, you didn't prove them. So who's thinking them? Cognitive science tells us that the sense of authorship, of being the thinker behind the thought, is itself an illusion. Your brain generates thoughts, and then the narrator comes in afterward to say, I thought that. In truth, the narration follows the script. The voice in your head is not the writer. It's the announcer reading lines off a teleprompter. It didn't create So again, the mind reflects something, but it's not origin. It's not control. It's story. Let's flip this further. You often imagine that your mind knows itself, that it can look inward and see its own truth. But modern neuroscience shows how wrong that is. The conscious mind is a thin slice of a much deeper iceberg. Most decisions, fears, motivations, and perceptions operate far below your awareness. You are shown a version of your inner world. You don't access it directly. You only see what the mirror decides to reflect. And it's heavily curated. Now, think about this. When you feel anger, you might think, I'm angry because of what she said. But maybe the feeling came first, and the explanation came later. Your mind needs stories, reasons. It must explain itself to itself. But those explanations are often reverse engineered. Not why you feel, but why you think you feel. So what if everything your mind shows you, your feelings, beliefs, personality, isn't a mirror image, but a projection? Not reflection, but simulation. Not truth, but narrative. This is why it's a false mirror. Because you trust it deeply. Because it shows you a picture and says, this is who you are, but it never shows the whole picture. It shows you what will make sense to you, not what is true about you. And maybe that's necessary, Maybe total self-awareness would paralyze. US. Maybe the mind lies because it has to protect you from contradictions, chaos, the unbearable truth that you are not oneself. But but if your mind only shows you what you can handle, what are you not seeing? That's the paradox. You live inside a mind that feels like your own. It speaks in your voice. It shows you the world. It remembers your past. It imagines your future. It comforts and punishes and reasons and reacts. But what if none of it is accurate? What if the voice isn't yours? What if the reflections have no object? Your mind may be a mirror, but it bends light. It hides cracks. It forgets where the glass ends and the sky begins. It shows you something. Always, but never everything. And you stare at the reflection and forget there might be nothing standing in front of the mirror at all. You've probably heard the phrase mind over matter, but what if that's not just motivational fluff? What if it's literal? What if thought itself is more powerful than substance? What if every physical thing you encounter, from your body to the buildings around you, is shaped, guided, or even conjured by ideas? This is idea makes flesh, the paradox that asks, what if the material world doesn't give rise to thought, but thought gives rise to the material world? Let's begin with something simple. Money, a piece of paper. Rectangular, inked, valueless, until someone tells you it's worth something. And now, with enough of it, you can buy a house, shape a city, start a war, or end one. But what? Is money really an idea, a collective hallucination? A shared agreement so powerful it reshapes physical behavior. You work for it, sacrifice for it, kill or heal for it. And yet it's not gold, not atoms, not weight. It's thought. Now stretch that idea outward. Nations, borders, laws, marriage, justice, success, failure. All constructs, not physical objects, but mental models projected onto the world until they become embedded in the world. Passport exists because a government exists, and the government exists because enough people believe in it. And that belief shapes cities, taxes, prisons, and schools. That idea becomes policy. Policy becomes architecture. Architecture becomes experience. And experience becomes identity. So thought becomes flesh. Still sounds abstract. Then look at your body. The placebo effect, one of the most studied and consistent phenomena in medical science, shows that belief alone can heal the body. Sugar pills cure pain. Fake surgeries improve mobility. Why? Because the brain believes. And belief triggers chemical changes. Endorphins rise. Immune responses shift. Pain signals drop. An idea. I am healing. Reshapes tissue. Placebo's evil twin, the nocebo effect, is just as real. People experience real symptoms, real sickness, real death, simply because they believe something is wrong. A diagnosis, even if false, can spiral into destruction. An idea becomes a poison. A word becomes a wound. So where does this end? Your identity, who you are, is an idea too. Built from stories you were told, stories you repeated, memories you re-edited, and expectations you carry. And that identity shapes your choices, your posture, your habits, your career, even the way you walk into a room. And once you do, the room responds. And that response confirms the idea. And the loop tightens. So maybe the person you've become wasn't built from the inside out, but from the outside in. An idea that hardened into behavior. And behavior that shaped your reality. Think now about architecture. Why are ceilings the height they are? Why are classrooms shaped like that? Why are clocks round? Not because of nature. Because of decisions, design, ideas made manifest in wood, steel, and stone. Someone had a thought, and now you live inside it. Even the concept of objectivity, the idea that reality exists independently of perception, is itself an idea, a philosophical stance, a belief in stability, in law, in repetition. But what if that belief is what holds the world together? What if the universe itself responds to attention, as some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest, collapsing waveforms into particles only when observed? Then maybe reality doesn't exist until an idea calls it forth. Maybe the world is a field of potential, and the mind selects, carves, instantiates. We call it thought. But perhaps it's more like construction. This raises a disturbing possibility. If the physical world is shaped by thought, what happens when thoughts rot? What happens when hate becomes law? When fear becomes norm? When trauma becomes architecture? The world warps. Bodies twist. Cities crack. Because bad ideas too make flesh. That's the paradox. You walk through a world that feels heavy, fixed, unchangeable. But look closer, And you'll find that almost everything you touch began as thought, not stone, not wood, not matter, but meaning. The office you sit in, the name you carry, the gods you fear, the prison you hide from, the person you believe yourself to be, all imagined, then built, flesh grown from idea. And if that's true, then what else are you? Building? Each thought, each belief, each subtle expectation, a seed pressed into the clay of the world. And the world answers. Not because it's listening, but because it's made of listening. So the next time you feel the hardness of reality pressing, and ask yourself, who imagined this? And why did I believe them? Because maybe, just maybe, you're not a body with thoughts. You're a thought that grew a body. Just to see what it would feel like? You want certainty. You want the ground beneath your feet to hold. You want the facts to stay still, the truths to be timeless, and your beliefs to align with something solid, something you can point to and say that is real. But what if doubt is the only thing that never changes? What if the path you walk, no matter how sturdy it feels, is made of stone that disappears the moment you step on it? This is doubtful stone path, the paradox that whispers, the more certain. You become the less real your foundation may be. Let's begin where you always begin. With belief, you believe the world exists. You believe you're awake. You believe you've had a past. You believe your thoughts are yours. And you believe you're walking forward toward some kind of truth. But pause. Why do you believe these things? Because they feel true? Because others told you? Because your senses confirm them? None of those are uncheckable foundations. They're functions of habit, repetition, agreement. You believe the stone is solid because every time you step, it holds. But that's not proof of substance. It's just a lack of contradiction. So far, now let's visit Descartes again. He doubted everything, his body, the world, the heavens, until he landed on a single surviving belief. I think, therefore I am. But even that statement assumes thinking requires a self. What if there is no thinker? Only thought bubbling up from nowhere? Suddenly, the one stone that felt unmovable begins to crack. Now consider language. You say, this is a tree. But tree is just a word, a noise, a cultural tag pinned onto a shape. You think words describe reality, but often they describe only themselves. I believe in freedom. What does that mean? Is it the same for you as for anyone else? Every word you use to explain a stone in your path might point to a different stone in someone else's. Or worse, a hole. Language doesn't fix the path. It paints it dot, and the paint peels dot. Now look at science, our proudest system of truth. Yes, it gives us medicine, rockets, AI, but it doesn't deliver certainty. It delivers models, provisional, testable, falsifiable explanations that work until they don't. Newton's laws worked perfectly. Until Einstein came along and bent time. Einstein worked. Until quantum mechanics poked holes in causality itself. Every stone you step on in science is a placeholder, useful, predictive, but temporary, always awaiting a better model. Always based on measurement, which at the quantum level changes what's measured. The stone supports you. Right before it shifts. Now look inward. Your identity feels stable. I am this kind of person. But you weren't 5 years ago. You won't be 5 years from now. Even your memories, the supposed bricks of your story, are rewritten. Each time you recall them, you aren't a fixed being walking a fixed road. You're a shifting traveler on a dissolving path, and yet you feel grounded. Why? Because your brain demands certainty. It hates gaps. It fills in missing parts of perception. It invents motives for your actions. It retroactively inserts because where there was only coincidence. And that confidence you feel about what's real, that's not proof. That's a neurological patch. A story you're told by your own brain to keep you from falling. But if every belief is subject to doubt, if every step forward changes the ground beneath it, then what is the path? Here comes the heart of the paradox. The only thing you can be sure of is that you can't be sure of anything. Certainty becomes the illusion. Doubt becomes the ground. But doubt doesn't feel safe. It feels empty, directionless, like wandering in fog with no landmarks. No confirmation dot yet. Doubt is honest. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't paint the path. It admits what it doesn't know. And in doing so, becomes the only stable stone on which you can stand. That's the paradox. You want belief. But belief is brittle. You want truth. But truth wears masks. You want foundation. But foundation is fluid dot, so maybe you don't need to walk on the path. Maybe you become the path dot. Each step you take isn't toward certainty. It's toward a deeper understanding of uncertainty. Each doubt isn't a failure. It's a milestone dot, and eventually you realize the most dangerous illusion isn't doubt. It's confidence without question. The moment you say, I know, you stop looking. But the moment you say, I'm not sure, the world opens again. Dot, so walk the path. Let the stone shift. Let the trail blur, because the way forward isn't paved in answers. It's paved in questions dot, and the longer you walk, the more you realize you never needed the path to be real. You only needed to keep walking. You spend your life searching for meaning dot in your work, your relationships, your art, your pain. You look at the stars and wonder why you're here. You look at yourself and ask, what does it all mean? But what if that's the wrong question? What? If reality doesn't contain meaning at all, but you still live inside it as if it does? This is meaningless reality frame. The paradox that confronts you with this unsettling truth. You may be trapped inside a perfectly functioning universe. That means absolutely nothing. Let's begin with the human urge to frame. Your mind needs context. It doesn't just want information. It wants narrative. Why did this happen? What caused it? What purpose does it serve? You experience an event, and the mind rushes to interpret it. A friend stops calling. You assume it's personal. You get a promotion. You see it as proof of your growth. You lose something. The world is testing you. You win something. The world is rewarding you. Your mind constantly weaves meaning into every frame, even when the world offers none. But meaning is not delivered by the world. It's invented by you. And this isn't just philosophical. It's neurological. The human brain is wired to detect patterns, even where none exist. It's called apophenia, the tendency to see meaning in randomness. It's why people find faces in clouds. Why gamblers see hot streaks. Why conspiracy theories thrive. Your brain would rather invent a story than sit inside chaos dot, because chaos. True randomness is intolerable dot, so you project order. You build a frame. You assign a why. Now scale that up. You're born into a world that doesn't explain itself. You're told stories about purpose, destiny, divinity, morality. Stories that offer a frame, a window through which you can view the meaningless void without going mad. But look deeper. Underneath the story is silence. The universe doesn't speak. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't judge. The stars burn because of fusion, not because they want to light your path. The rain falls on the cruel and the kind alike. The earth rotates not for your benefit, but because momentum demands it dot, and yet you keep assigning meaning. You say, everything happens for a reason. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe things just happen, and then you invent the reason. Afterward dot, so the frame remains. But the canvas is blank. Let's take a darker turn. If reality is fundamentally meaningless, then everything you've loved, lost, feared, built, destroyed, hoped for, is also suspended in that same void. Your relationships. Constructs, your goals, temporary games, your values, cultural patterns passed down like viral codes, even your suffering, which feels so deeply personal, maybe nothing more than nervous. Tissue reacting to stimuli dot, so why go on? Why get up? Why care? Here's where the paradox sharpens dot. You can't live without a frame. But every frame is false. You build meaning and then watch it collapse. You find truth and then see it replaced. You name your purpose and then question it. But instead of despair, something strange happens. You start to find beauty not in the meaning, but in the act of making it anyway. You look into the meaningless abyss and you paint it. You give it shape. You tell it a story, not because it's true, but because it's human. That's the paradox. Meaning doesn't come from reality. But you live as if it does, because to live at all, you must pretend. You step into the frame. You call this person a friend. You call this task a mission. You call this moment special. And, somewhere in the back of your mind, that it's all invented. And yet, it still moves you. It still feels real. It still works. The frame is fake. But the experience inside it is not. Even a dream can make you cry. So maybe you were never meant to find meaning. Maybe you were meant to create it constantly in the face of a silent cosmos. And maybe that creation, though born from illusion, is the most honest thing you'll ever do. So next time you hear yourself ask, what does this mean? Pause and ask instead, what meaning am I choosing to give this? Because the frame you build around your life, no matter how imaginary, might be the only thing that lets you live it. Not because it's true, but because you believe it. And belief, as we've seen again and again, is often stronger than reality. So go ahead, frame the moment, lie to yourself, gently, beautifully. Say, this matters. Even if a DOE sends single quotes T. Because in a meaningless reality, that may be the only thing that ever can. You've been taught to separate thought and matter. Beliefs belong in the mind. Matter belongs in the world. What you think shouldn't affect what is, not physically, not concretely, right? But then, why does it? Why do beliefs invisible, intangible, immeasurable, seem to shape the very substance of your reality? This is belief bends matter, the paradox that asks, if your beliefs aren't real, why does the world behave as if they are? Let's start simple. You believe you're capable, confident. You walk into a room taller, shoulders back. People respond. Too differently. That reaction affirms your belief. Your body responds. Your posture changes. The room changes. The belief was in your mind. But the consequences were physical. You change matter with thought. Still sounds psychological. Let's go deeper. Imagine you believe you are in danger, even when you're not. Your heart races. Blood vessels constrict. Cortisol floods your system. Muscles tighten. Immunity drops. Sleep fractures. Over time, your body reshapes itself around a lie. The belief rewrites your cells, and this happens every day. Chronic stress, shame, fear, they aren't just emotions. They're conditions. Mental models with physical footprints. Ideas that build bone, fat, scars, tumors. Your body becomes your biography. But the most disturbing version of this happens when the belief isn't yours. Children who are told they are sick, stupid, or worthless, and who believe it, will often develop symptoms, learning disabilities, or depression that match that belief. The words of others become matter. An idea becomes a diagnosis. A diagnosis becomes biology. Belief, unprovable, untestable belief, rewrites flesh. Still doubt it? Then consider the placebo effect again. A person takes a sugar pill, believes it will help, and their pain decreases, their wound heals, their depression lifts, their brain releases endorphins. In some cases, measurable changes occur on scans. Blood pressure drops, hormone levels adjust, and it's not because of the pill. It's because the belief changed the body. Now flip it, the nocebo. Tell someone a harmless pill will cause nausea, and they'll throw up. Give someone a fake diagnosis, and they'll begin to feel symptoms. The body believes the mind's fiction, and bends accordingly. So what are we dealing with here? A mind so powerful it doesn't just perceive reality, it participates in sculpting it. Now go deeper. Belief doesn't only shape your own body. It shapes collective matter. Environments, institutions, economies. Markets crash not because of objective data, but because of beliefs about the data. Faith in the system is enough to stabilize or collapse entire financial empires. Religions persist not because gods walk among us, but because enough people believe they do. That belief erects temples, divides nations, destroys cities, all from an invisible root. And we say, that's not real. But the buildings are real. The wars are real. The suffering is real. The belief bent matter. Now turn inward. What do you believe about yourself? That you are too late? Too broken? That you're not smart enough? Those beliefs have mass. They shape how you sit, how you speak, how you breathe. They write themselves into your voice, your spine, your skin. What if every time you said, I can't, your muscles tensed just enough to make it true? What if every belief you repeated became a tiny adjustment, a change in behavior, posture, tone, that bent your reality just slightly until it aligned? Then you are not just a person who holds beliefs. You are a belief engine that constantly edits the world to match its output. And if that's true, then you're not living in reality. You're living in a physicalized echo of your convictions. This is the paradox. Matter seems objective. Stone, wood, bone, solid, but your mind, soft, electric, vaporous, can move it. Not just in metaphor, in measurable consequence. And once you realize this, the ground shifts, because it means you are shaping a world without knowing that you're the sculptor. You believed you were powerless, and the world confirmed it. You believed you were too different, and the world echoed it. You believed nothing could change. And so, ID and single quotes D dot until maybe you believe otherwise. That's the danger. That's the opportunity. Belief is the softest thing, and the heaviest dot. It's not the world that needs to change. It's the frame through which you bend it, and now the question becomes, which beliefs are bending your world? While you still think they're harmless, you walk outside, the sun hits your skin, a breeze brushes your cheek, a bird sings, a car drives past. You experience the world, and it floods your senses. The outside comes in, and naturally you believe this is how it works. Reality happens. Gives you perceive it, gives you think about it. But what if the flow isn't that simple? What if reality doesn't just enter your thoughts? It feeds them, shapes them, even when you think you're in control. This is reality feeds thought, the paradox that reveals what you believe is shaped not only by your mind, but by the very world your mind tries to understand. Let's begin with perception. You don't see the world as it is. You see it as you need it to be, to survive, to function, to find your place. The world you interact with is not the raw, chaotic stream of reality. It's a simplified version, filtered by your brain, cleaned up by your senses, and narrowed by attention. But once this processed version gets in, it writes itself into your thoughts. You walk through a beautiful garden. You think nature is peaceful. But the thought wasn't born in isolation. It was fed by colors, light, warmth, movement. You didn't create the idea. You received the world and then named the feeling it gave you. Now take something darker. You grow up in a home where love is conditional, where silence is the safest option, where mistakes are punished. You learn to think thoughts that match that world. Don't speak too loud. Don't get too close. People leave. These thoughts are abstract. They were fed to you by repeated doses of lived reality. Now expand further. You're raised in a culture that rewards conformity, or rebellion, or ambition, or obedience. You begin to form thoughts about yourself, your worth, your role, your limits, based not on logic, but on what your environment made feel true. And once these thoughts take hold, they loop. The world feeds your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your perception. Your perception filters the world. And around it goes. Soon, you're not sure where you end and your environment begins. Now, consider language. You think in words, sentences, symbols. But who taught you those words? You didn't invent the language in your head. It was given to you, passed down, absorbed. And with it came categories, values, frameworks. You were told what's normal, what's real, what's true. Long before you questioned any of it, the structure of your language is the architecture of your thought. And that structure, built by the world. Even your deepest inner truths might not be yours. What you believe about love, freedom, success, suffering, all of it is shaped by exposure, by experience, by repetition. You didn't invent the concepts. You inherited them, lived them, became them, and yet you still feel like the author of your thoughts. That's the illusion. You say, I believe X, but maybe X was just the loudest echo in the room. Now let's take it into science. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most evidence-based. Psychotherapy is based on the idea that thoughts influence feelings, and feelings influence behavior. But newer studies suggest that behavior and environment can actually reshape thoughts. Even more directly, thought change the room you live in, change your physical habits, change the people around you, and your thoughts begin to shift, often without your conscious effort, which means your mind may be less of a private theater and more of a feedback system, one that adjusts its beliefs based on the structure and rhythm of what surrounds it. And this leads to the paradox. You believe? That thought gives shape to your experience. But your experience is constantly shaping your thought, often in ways you don't notice. You live in a loop. Reality feeds thought. Thought tries to interpret reality. But the interpretation is already shaped by the last interpretation. And that, in turn, was shaped by the last moment of reality. There's no clean break. You don't see the world and then think about it. You think because the world made you think. And yet, the world you think about was already filtered through thought. So, what's real? Is the world out there shaping your thoughts? Or are your thoughts projecting onto the world, deciding what's real? The answer, frustratingly, is both. They co-create each other. A hall of mirrors, a spiral, a loop that never began and never ends. So what do? You watch. You start to notice. You ask, where did this thought come from? You ask, what kind of world would produce this belief? You ask, am I still thinking this because it's true? Or because it once felt true? Because once you see that reality is shaping your thoughts, you might be able to shape reality back. Not by force, not by fantasy, but by interrupting the loop. And in that tiny pause between what the world gives you and how your mind receives it, you find the only freedom there ever was. You think of yourself as the witness, the one behind the eyes, the watcher, the observer who sees the world unfold. You imagine that while everything around you changes, traffic, seasons, people, emotions, you remain stable, a presence behind the noise, a still point within motion. But what if that stillness is a trick? What if the observer, the very part of you that claims to be real, is just another character in the story? This is observer inside fiction. The paradox that asks, if you're watching the movie, how do you know you're not part of it? Let's begin with your inner voice. Right now, as you read this, there's a sense that you are doing the reading. Not just your eyes scanning the screen, but a self back there, understanding, interpreting, following along. You imagine this self as a constant. A you who experiences the flow of time, who remembers the past and anticipates the future. But that's an assumption, because the observer, the one you feel behind the curtain, is not some untouched witness. It's made from the same mental material as the rest of the mind. It's built from memory, from language, from thoughts about thoughts. The observer is not standing outside the play. It's standing on the stage, wearing the costume of the narrator, still skeptical. Try to find the observer. Seriously, pause. Turn your attention inward. Try to locate the exact place where the observer lives. Is it behind your eyes? In your chest? Is it a voice? A watcher? The more you look, the more it slips away. You find sensations, thoughts, feelings, but you never find the thing having them. You find content, but not the container. And here's where the paradox begins to spiral. You are watching a mind that is pretending to be watched, a process imagining it has a pilot. Let's bring in neuroscience. There's no single place in the brain where the self resides. The idea of a unified I is an illusion, a cognitive construction. Different parts of the brain handle different tasks: movement, language, emotion, memory. And somehow, your brain stitches these together into the illusion of a single observer. But it's not one thing dot, it's a narrative thread. A voiceover track on a scattered film reel, and like all stories, it's made of fiction, useful fiction. Survival fiction dot now step into simulation theory for a moment dot in a simulated world. The player feels like the observer. You move through the game, make choices, solve problems. But you're still inside the system. You're not above it. You're inside the fiction, even if you feel like the one in control. Maybe your life is no different. Not because it's literally a simulation, but because your sense of self, your sense of being the watcher, is embedded within the story. It's trying to observe. You're not behind the story. You are a plot device with delusions of authorship. This is reflected in Eastern philosophy. 2. In Advaita Vedanta, the ultimate illusion is not the world, but the belief that there is a separate self observing the world. In Buddhism, the self is called anatta, not a soul, not a witness, but a bundle of experiences misinterpreting itself as one. In Dzogchen practice. The aim is to dissolve the illusion of the observer entirely, not to find truth, but to drop the need for a point of view, because once you let go of the watcher, something else appears. Just awareness, ownerless, spontaneous, unclaimed. You don't see the tree. There is seeing. You don't feel the breath. There is breath. And without an observer, life keeps happening, which means the observer was never required. Only the fiction of one. So why does it feel so convincing? Because narrative demands a protagonist. Your brain evolved to tell stories, and every story needs a hero. If events happen without a central you, the mind couldn't organize experience. So it invents one. You. And it places that you just behind your face, gives it memories, a voice, a mission, but it's not watching. It's being watched. It's not above the fiction. It is the fiction. That's the paradox. The thing inside you that feels most real, the calm witness, the conscious knower, the silent watcher, is just another character in a tale. And even that character is made of thoughts. And those thoughts are shaped by belief, and those beliefs are shaped by culture. And culture is shaped by time, and time is shaped by memory, and memory is shaped by thought. And there's no exit unless you stop looking for one, because maybe there's no need to escape to fiction. Maybe the problem was thinking you were above it in the first place. You're not the observer. You're the observation, and that's what makes it beautiful. You've had it happen before. A memory that feels too vivid to forget, but turned out to be false. A dream that felt more real than waking. An emotion about something that never happened. You knew it until you idea in single quotes T. So here's the question. If something is unreal, but you've known it, felt it, remembered it, then what is it really? This is unreal yet known, the paradox that stares directly at the contradiction between reality and knowing, and asks, can something be false and still feel true enough to shape you forever? Let's start with memory. You trust your memories. They're how you construct your story. You believe they're internal photographs of the truth. Memory is reconstruction, not replay. When you recall something, your brain pulls bits and fragments, emotions, visuals, sounds, and stitches them together based on context, current mood, and expectation. It doesn't give you the past. It gives you a version of the past that feels right now, which means you can deeply know a moment that never actually occurred. This has been proven in studies. Participants have been led to remember entire false events, being lost in a mall, meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, committing a childhood crime. Not just vague ideas, detailed, emotional, vivid memories. All fabricated. Yet the participants didn't feel like they were lying. They knew it happened. Unreal. Yet known. Now think about dreams. You wake up from a dream that shook you. Someone died. You were abandoned. You fell in love. You cried. You wake and nothing happened, but the emotion lingers. It's real. You carry it all day. Maybe longer. The event wasn't real, but the impact was. You felt it. And that feeling reshaped your mood, your behavior, your choices. So what's more important? the event or the aftermath. Now, go one level deeper. Belief. You might believe you're not good enough, that you are unwanted, that you're lucky to be here, that the universe is watching, that your life has purpose. You may know these things even when there's no evidence, and your actions follow. You choose jobs, relationships, risks, all according to the truths you know. But what if those truths were never true? What? If your life is built on foundations that were imagined, misunderstood, or given to you by someone who never questioned them, would that make your life a lie? Or would it make truth something else entirely? That's the paradox. Knowing is supposed to reflect reality, but often it doesn't. Often it reflects survival, emotion, need, narrative. And once something is known, even falsely, it begins to shape everything that follows. Like a compass that points not to the North Pole, but to the last direction. You survived in . Now step into collective experience. Entire nations, religions, civilizations are built on origin stories that are, by empirical standards, unverifiable. Creation myths, miracles, prophecies, martyrs, curses, blessings. And yet, people live and die for them. Build temples for them. Find peace and war and purpose inside them. Are these ideas false in the factual sense? Maybe. But experientially, they are known. And that knowing acts on the world. A belief in heaven can change how you treat a stranger. A belief in karma can change how you respond to betrayal. A belief in destiny can make you walk through fire. So what matters more? Whether something is real or whether it moves you? This is where the line between illusion and influence collapses. You may think, if it's not real, it shouldn't matter. But the mind doesn't work that way. Your brain doesn't ask for external proof before reacting. It asks, does this feel true? Have I felt this before? Is this familiar? If yes, it proceeds. So maybe truth is not what exists. Maybe truth is what persists in feeling, in memory. In effect, even if unreal, that's the paradox. Your inner world may be filled with things that never happened, events that never were, beliefs that were never accurate, fears that were never justified, dreams that never unfolded. And yet, they've sculpted you, carved patterns into your behavior, written chapters into your personality, left fingerprints on your choices. So are they false? Or are they something more powerful because they were never checked by fact? The unreal is supposed to vanish, but sometimes it stays. Longer than anything true. More vivid than anything verifiable. And maybe that's what you are, in the end. A creature shaped not by what was real, but by what was known to be, even if it wasn't unreal yet known, and forever carried forward. You've heard the word illusion used. Why? Thought. It's just an illusion. People say a trick of the mind, a glitch in the senses, something to be corrected and moved past. Illusions are supposed to vanish when truth arrives. They're errors, bugs in the system, but what if they don't? What if illusions don't just linger, but eventually harden into laws? What if the things that once fooled you become the very rules you live by? This is illusion becomes law, the paradox that explores. What happens when the lies you believe in long enough become the structure of your reality, not in spite of being false, but because you accepted them as true? Let's begin with vision. Your eyes are filled with blind spots, literally. Where the optic nerve meets the retina, you see nothing. Your brain fills in the missing data. You don't notice? You see a world that seems seamless. That's an illusion. But your brain doesn't discard it. It builds on it. That fake data becomes part of your ongoing reality. Your sense of sight is, in part, a hallucination. And yet, you use it to cross streets, to recognize faces, to build civilizations. The illusion became law. Now, let's move to color. Color doesn't exist in the world. It's not out there. It's a byproduct of how your brain interprets wavelengths of light. There's no such thing as red, In the fabric of the universe, there are just vibrations. Your brain invents the rest, but once it does, red becomes real. Red means danger, love, heat, anger. We assign value, emotion, regulation. Red lights stop cars. Red flags start wars. The illusion of color becomes a social and legal framework. It governs behavior. It shapes response. Again, the illusion became law. Now zoom out. Consider money. It has no inherent value. A paper bill is just that, paper. But we agree that it's worth something. We believe in the illusion, and because we do, it rules us. Markets rise and fall. Fortunes are made and lost. Lives are saved or destroyed, not by real objects, but by imagined worth. Not by intrinsic value, but by collective faith in a shared illusion. And once everyone believes, the illusion becomes law. Let's bring it home. Identity. You were born into a name, a nationality, a gender, a race, a religion. These are not raw truths. They're categories created and passed down, inherited through stories and systems. Yet these identities are enforced socially, economically, politically. They determine your safety, your opportunities, your role in the world. But the boundaries are fuzzy. The rules are shifting. The meanings are contested. Still, we behave as if they're fixed. We treat the invented as immutable. We take illusion and enforce it as law. Now, let's take the final leap. Yourself, your sense of I. The person reading this is not a solid core. It's a construction built from memory, personality, expectation, culture, and biology. There is no single permanent self. And yet, you operate as if there is. You act in accordance with the fiction. You say, I would never do that, or that's just who I am. But who told you? When did that story get written? You live inside an illusion of self, but you treat it like law. You allow it to define your future. You allow it to limit your choices. You don't question it because it feels so real. And maybe that's the most dangerous part. Illusions don't just deceive. They stabilize. They become reference points. And when enough people agree on them, they ossify. They become institutions. Beliefs, laws, identities, nations, norms. And once they're built, they're hard to break. Because to challenge them is to challenge the very rules holding your life together. And here's the loop. Illusions are adopted for comfort. They're believed for survival. They're enforced for stability. And then they become law. But the law itself, the thing that seems undeniable, was once just a useful lie. That's the paradox. The structure of your life may be built from shadows, but they cast weight. They shape roads. They become fences and thrones and prisons and crowns. You walk on a floor that was never solid. But because you never fell through, you decided it was concrete. And now you protect it. You argue for it. You say, this is just the way it is, but the way it is may only be the way you believed it was. So ask yourself, which part of your life feels like law, but may have started as illusion? And are you still living by rules you never chose, but learned to follow because everyone else pretended they were real? Maybe it's not about escaping the illusion. Maybe it's about choosing which illusions are worth keeping and which ones never deserve to become law in the first place. You walk into a room, you see a window, a chair, a shadow moving just slightly to the left. It's instant, automatic. You don't think about perceiving the world. You just do it. You assume the world is already there and you're just arriving to take it in. But what if you've got it backward? What if the world isn't something you step into, but something your mind draws around you? This is mind draws world. The paradox that questions your most basic assumption, that the world is out there and your mind just happens to be floating inside it. Instead, what if your mind isn't in the world, but the world is inside your mind? Let's start with a simple act. Vision. Your eyes don't show you the world. They transmit bits of raw data, light, contrast, motion. That data hits the back of your retina, is inverted, split into signals sent down the optic nerve, and processed by multiple parts of your brain. Then, and only then, do you get a room. There's no little person watching a screen inside your head. There's only a reconstruction, an internal model that feels like the world. You never see what's out there. You only see your mind's drawing of what's probably out there. Now extend that to sound, to touch, to time, to identity. Your brain is constantly interpreting, filling in gaps, making predictions, smoothing rough edges. You touch a table and it feels hard. But what you're feeling is the repulsion of electrons, a force field your mind translates as solidness. You smell a flower and associate it with childhood, but the scent isn't stored in the flower. The meaning is made by you. Your mind doesn't just perceive the world. It constructs it, and then, somehow, forgets that it did. Now let's look at neuroplasticity. Why your brain changes shape based on experience. When you learn a new skill, develop a habit, or shift your emotional patterns, your brain rewires itself. New connections form. Old ones weaken. But that doesn't just affect how you think. It changes what you see. Studies show that meditators begin to perceive time differently. Trauma survivors notice danger before others even register it. Musicians hear more detail in sound. Architects notice structure others miss. Schizophrenic patients often perceive meaning where others see chaos. So whose world is correct? There isn't a world. There are many versions, drawn by many minds, which brings us to perceptual reality. You've heard the phrase, perception is reality. But what if that's not just metaphor? If everything you know about the world, the way it feels, smells, unfolds, is filtered through mind, then the world you live in is, by definition, a mental event. And that event isn't passive. It's creative. It's interpretive. It's always drawing. Even space itself, the room you think you're in, is just a framework generated by your brain. There's no way to step outside your mind and see the actual world. Every step, every glance, every sound is already part of the drawing. You can't escape the sketch. You are the sketch. But here's where it gets even stranger. When you believe something, when you expect to see it, your mind bends the world to match. Expect people to dislike you. You interpret their silence as rejection. Expect to fail. You focus on obstacles. Expect beauty. You find it in ordinary things. Your beliefs alter perception, and perception alters reality. And reality reinforces belief. It's a loop. Your mind draws the world reflects the drawing, and the drawing feels like truth. So what happens when you change your mind? You change your world. Not in some magical manifestation way, but literally change how you interpret a room, and it becomes different. Change what you believe about a person, and their face changes meaning. Change how you speak to yourself, and the entire internal landscape shifts. That's not psychology. That's physics of perception. And now the paradox. You thought you were looking at a world that existed before you. But every time you opened your eyes, your mind was already drawing it into being. There's no observer behind the glass. There's just drawing, rendering, sketching, adjusting, forgetting that it ever held the pen. So when you say, that's just how life is, pause and ask, whose drawing is this? Because the lines you see, the lines that seem permanent, heavy, inevitable, were etched, perhaps long ago, by thoughts you didn't choose, but you can redraw, you can reframe, you can notice the edge of the canvas and realize that what you believed was fixed is still being penciled in, not because the world is fake, but because mind and world were never separate to begin with. They've always been the same trembling hand, drawing each other again and again and again. You're surrounded by substance. Brick walls, coffee mugs, bodies, mountains, stars, things that feel weighty, grounded, real. You assume that because they have mass, they must also have truth, that the physical world is inherently valid, because It exists. But now the paradox knocks on that foundation and listens for the hollow echo inside. What if substance isn't proof of truth? What if something can be solid, functional, unshakably there, and still be completely false? This is substance without truth, the paradox that dares to separate material presence from philosophical reality. Let's begin with history. The Earth, for most of human existence, was believed to be flat. Not because people were foolish, but because the belief worked. It explained the horizon, it guided ships, it matched observation. Entire systems of navigation, cosmology, religion, all structured around this truth. It had substance. Maps were made, rules followed, towers built. But it wasn't true. Now jump forward. For centuries, illness was believed to result from bad air or imbalanced humors. Leeches were used. Doctors wore plague masks. Lives were ended, saved, judged, based on a system that seemed logical, repeatable, material, but it was false. A fiction that just happened to have scaffolding. So ask yourself, if something has structure, can be touched, used, or experienced, does that mean it's true? Or can lies take form? Let's look at modern examples. Racism, for instance, is built on false premises, the belief that one group of humans is biologically superior to another. We know now, genetically, this is nonsense. Yet that belief has built entire civilizations. With borders, governments, neighborhoods, wars, it is a falsehood. With skyscrapers. Substance, without truth. Now turn inward. You might believe you're not lovable, that you're not talented, that you don't deserve peace. These aren't fleeting thoughts. They're beliefs with substance. They shape your posture, your tone, your decisions, your relationships. They take form in the world. They are visible to others. But are they true? Probably not. But that doesn't stop them from acting on you, like gravity. Substance doesn't care about truth. It cares about repetition. Repeat a lie often enough, to yourself, to others, across generations, and it builds scaffolding. It becomes habit, policy, culture. Stone. Now think about dreams. In a dream, you can build a city. You can sit in a house, pour coffee, walk through a hallway. Everything feels solid. You knock on wood, you turn on lights, but none of it exists. The brain simulates substance from nothing. Is it real? Yes. Experientially. No. Materially. So again, we ask, what is truth? If substance can be built from error, illusion, dream, trauma, then maybe truth is something else. Maybe truth isn't what's there. Maybe truth is what's aligned with reality, with clarity, with coherence, with inner stillness. The world may hand you a brick, but it doesn't tell you what the brick is for. You build a prison or a home, and some people live in massive castles of untruth. Their lives work. Their systems are efficient. Their routines produce results. But underneath is a story that isn't real. In one day, those structures fall. Because substance without truth can only last so long. That's the paradox. You live in a world where falsehoods can be physical, where delusion can be well lit, landscaped, and Instagrammable, where lies can have corner offices, billboards, and family crests. But the fact that something stands doesn't mean it should. You can't trust form alone. You must question its origin. Where did this structure come from? What idea is this wall made of? Who laid the foundation? And were they dreaming? So here's the strange invitation. Start tapping on the walls around you. Not literally, but existentially. Ask what parts of your life feel heavy, but hollow, solid, but sour, movable, but somehow wrong. And when you find one, ask yourself, is this made of truth or just of time? Because a lie, if practiced long enough, becomes tradition, and tradition becomes law, and law becomes unchallengeable substance. But even the tallest tower can be built from sand, and even the smallest doubt can be the first hammer swing. You Don't have to tear it all down. But you do have to peek behind the bricks, because not everything that holds weight holds truth, and not everything that looks real deserves to remain standing. You reach out and touch something. A doorknob, a hand, a tree. It resists you. It feels real, present, definite, and that sensation, that resistance is what convinces you it exists. But what if it's a trick? What if the very things that feel most solid, most certain, most tangible are precisely what hide the emptiness underneath? This is tangible makes void, the paradox that proposes. The more a thing convinces you it is real, the less you notice what isn't there, and the more the real becomes a veil for a silent, hidden absence. Let's begin with touch. Your body never actually touches anything. At the atomic level, matter is made up of vast empty spaces. When you press your hand to a table, the atoms in your skin and the atoms in the wood repel each other through electromagnetic force. What you feel is resistance, not contact. Your hand never truly meets the surface, but your brain interprets the resistance as presence. The sensation becomes proof. You felt it, therefore it is dot, and so the tangible world becomes a stand-in for the invisible, a surface that covers a void dot. Now consider your routines. You brush your teeth, pour coffee, lock the door. These actions are physical anchors. They shape your day. They define structure. They feel realer than your thoughts. But why? Because they can be done, repeated, felt dot. They become the scaffolding of identity. The furniture of reality dot. But if you stop just for a moment and ask why you do them, you may find no clear answer. Just silence. Just momentum. Just habit. Pretending to be meaning dot. The tangible action, repeated over time, becomes a way to avoid the question. What is this all for? Now, let's step into emotion. Have you ever cried for someone who didn't exist? A fictional character, a dream figure, a memory that never actually happened. The emotional response was real. Tears, pulse, ache. But the trigger was nothing. The tangible feeling emerged from a void, and the pain made it feel valid. So valid, in fact, that you stopped questioning whether the source ever existed dot in this way. Tangibility is a cover, a mask that says, don't look deeper. You've already felt enough. Let's go further. When a belief takes physical form, a ritual, a uniform, a statue, it becomes tangible. And that tangibility makes it hard to question. You kneel at an altar, you wear a badge, you hold a relic. These things feel sacred, permanent. But ask yourself, would they still matter if you've never seen them before? Or does their weight come from repetition, from memory, from the stories we wrap them in? Is the object holy or is it hollow? Because here's the secret, the more convincing the surface, the easier it becomes to forget what it's hiding. Tangible things don't prove what's there. They obscure what's missing. Now think about your own identity. You have a name, a face, a body. These are tangible facts. You write them on forms. You respond when called. You see yourself in the mirror, and yet when you close your eyes and strip away language, what remains? You try to find a self, but you never quite do. You find thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, but no center, no fixed identity. Body is there. The feelings are there. But the I that claims them is nowhere. The more you reach for yourself, the more it dissolves, like a statue made of smoke. So here's the paradox. The physical world feels solid, but its solidity is the very thing that hides its emptiness. Tangible does not mean fundamental. Presence does not mean essence. Weight does not mean truth. In fact, the heavier the object, the more it may be concealing a hole beneath. And yet, we worship the tangible. We build our lives around what we can hold. Hold jobs, hold titles, hold grudges, hold hands. And these things keep us from noticing the quiet truth. Nothing is truly held. Everything slips. Everything passes. And beneath it all, the ground is not ground. It's sky, painted to look like stone. So what do? Do you reject the tangible? No. You simply stop mistaking it for everything. You recognize the coffee cup as warm, but not as meaning. You recognize your name as useful, but not as identity. You recognize your pain as real, but not as proof of itself. You begin to notice the space between the touch, the stillness inside the sound, the void behind the object, and in doing so, you stop being fooled by solidity. You stop worshiping service. You learn to feel the nothing, not as a lack, but as a presence too quiet to knock. Tangible is not a Lee. It's just not the whole story. And the paradox is this: the more the world insists it is real, the more you should wonder what it's trying to distract you from. You chase what's real, the authentic, the raw, the unfiltered truth. You want to know what's actually there, beneath appearances, behind the curtain. And so you look deeper and deeper, peeling back the layers, hoping to reach some final, undeniable core. But every time you dig, you find another performance, another story, another mask pretending to be a mirror. This is circle of realness. The paradox where every time you try to get closer to what's real, you end up in another version of illusion, just more cleverly disguised. Let's begin with identity. You try to be yourself. You say, I want to be real. So you strip off the polite smile, the rehearsed words, the curated persona. You stop pleasing others. You get honest. But what happens? You start performing honesty. You start identifying as authentic. You talk about how real you are and feel proud of not caring what people think. But now you're back in performance. You're attached to being unattached. You're presenting your non-presentation. You walked away from the mask and picked up another one, this time labeled real. Now zoom out to media. You scroll through social feeds. Most of it is fake. Filters, edits, scripts. So you find creators who are raw, unfiltered, candid. They show their mess, their breakdowns, their vulnerabilities. And for a while, it feels real. Until you realize even the breakdowns are curated. Even the vulnerability is a brand. Even the crying selfie is shot in good light. Reality is monetized. Authenticity is packaged. The truth is stylized. So where's the realness now? You turn to silence, meditation, nature. You unplug. You walk into a forest and listen to birdsong. It's real, you think. Finally, but then your mind narrates. This is so peaceful. I'm being real right now. This is who I really am. And just like that, the voice returns, labeling, claiming, attaching. You're performing to yourself. You're watching yourself be real. Like a mirror staring at its own reflection. You can't escape it. Even when you're alone, trying not to be anyone. You're still someone trying to not be anyone. And that's the circle. Every attempt to be real generates a new illusion of realness. Let's go deeper. Language itself is a trap. The moment you name something, you freeze it. You turn the experience into symbol. You take the river and call it water. You take the ache in your chest and call it sadness. But the word isn't the thing. It's a pointing finger, not the moon. And yet you chase truth through words, books, quotes, insights. Each one feels close. But none of them are it. You never arrive. You just loop from surface to depth, from mask to mirror, from fake to real to fake again. Even philosophy does this. It deconstructs the world, peels away illusions, dismantles certainty. But then it builds a theory around that very deconstruction. It says, this is the real truth now. And we start the cycle over. Realness becomes a myth of itself. The more you reach for it, the more it recedes, because realness isn't a place you find. It's a place you keep redrawing. So what now? Give up? Not quite. Here's the shift. Instead of chasing what's real, notice the impulse to chase. Notice how the mind wants a final answer. Notice how it wraps itself in stories, then calls those stories truth. And then let go. Let go of needing to feel real. Let the performance happen without clinging to it. Let the mask fall off, and don't rush to replace it. Let yourself be. Fake and real and confused and clear all at once, because that, strangely, might be the truest thing of all. Not purity, not rawness, not some final core, but the endless shifting circle of trying to see yourself and forgetting you're the one doing the seeing. So the paradox ends where it began. You wanted to find what's real. But realness was never outside the circle. It is the circle, drawn and erased again and again. And when you stop trying to step outside it, you finally step in. You made it. 2 hours, 25 paradoxes, dozens of experiments, thought loops, ontological riddles, and 1,000 slow dissolves of everything you once called real. And now, here you are, still breathing, still reading, still wondering, was any of this true? But wait, don't answer too quickly, because truth, as you've now seen, is no longer the solid ground you thought it was. Not a rock you stand on, not a light you follow. It's more like mist that rearranges as soon as you step into it. It's the vanishing point, the place the lines of perception converge, but never quite touch. Let's look around one last time. You've seen how your mind draws the world, then forgets it did. You've seen how your body never actually touches anything, how the past is reconstructed, the self is an echo, and certainty is often just a shared hallucination dressed up in ritual and repetition. You've seen reality wear masks, layer upon layer, each more convincing than the last, precisely because you wanted it to be and not that longing to find what's really real is the gravitational pull that holds the illusion together. You saw how dreams feel real until they don't, how lies become law, how the mind fakes solidity out of vibration and story. You saw illusions with weight, fictions with consequence, ideas so sticky they built empires and prisons. And slowly, piece by piece, your sense of what's dependable began to blur. Walls got softer. The floor gave a little. The sky began to curve in strange directions. You started to notice the performance in people, in thought, in self. And maybe, just maybe, you started to wonder, if everything is a show, then where's the audience? The answer, of course, is recursive. You're watching yourself watch the world, thinking about thinking, observing the observer. And every time you try to step outside the loop, you find yourself still inside, because there's no outside. Reality doesn't come with a backstage. There's no final curtain to pull. No ultimate perspective that will say, yes, this is the real. And that might sound hopeless, but it's not. It's liberating, because once you stop chasing some final fixed capital T truth, you start to live in a different way. You stop needing to grip the world. You stop demanding certainty from experience. You stop trying to measure the value of moments by their solidity, and you start to flow with the paradox. You begin to play, not as in nothing matters, but as in nothing has to pretend to be more than it is. A moment can be just a moment. A thought can pass like a cloud. A self can flicker and change. You realize that real isn't an object. It's a movement. It's a relationship between attention and presence. It's the thing happening right now. Before your mind narrates it. And when you land there, even for a breath, the chase dissolves. Not because you found the answer, but because the question let go of you. So what do you do now that the pillars have melted? You live, but differently. You love people, knowing they're shifting, storied, unresolved. You explore ideas, knowing they'll contradict themselves. You look in the mirror, not for a fixed identity, but for a glimpse of the ever reappearing mystery behind your eyes. And most of all, you stop trying to solve existence. You begin to inhabit it. Softly, curiously, with fewer labels and more presence. And when you walk through a world that seems concrete again, buildings, clocks, headlines, names, you remember? Even concrete is just dust in denial. Even now, this moment, this screen, this you reading me, are part of the drawing. And the drawing will change. So don't hold your breath for real. Let realness breathe through you. Because at the center of all these paradoxes, beneath the illusions, through the questions behind the masks, is something you can't quite name. But you can feel it. It's the stillness between thoughts. It's the quiet yes behind wonder. It's not an answer. It's not a truth. It's something simpler. You're here and you don't know why. And that in itself is enough, because sometimes the most real thing is the silence that remains when everything else has fallen away.